So, in our last episode, I asked you to write a description of the next level version of you. And somewhere in that exercise, if you actually did it, there was a moment, a line you wrote that felt true but also felt like a reach, right? A belief you tried on that didn't quite fit yet. A version of yourself you couldn't see clearly but couldn't quite feel as real. That gap between what you can see and what you can feel, that's what today is about. Because here's the thing, you don't just have a vision problem, you have a belief problem. The reason the next level feels like a reach rather than a reality isn't because it isn't possible. It's because somewhere underneath the goals and the strategy and the genuine desire, there is a set of beliefs running quietly in the background, old beliefs. Beliefs that made sense once, beliefs that actually served you at some point in your life, beliefs that are now a ceiling. And the work of becoming the next version of yourself, the real work, the work underneath all that productivity and the strategy, is learning to see those beliefs clearly, to name them, to understand where they come from, and then to make a conscious choice about whether they still get to be the authors of your life. That's what we're going that's where we're going today. So welcome back to On to Purpose Over Paycheck podcast. I'm Troy, and we are in the new week and in our next episode, and we're doing a deep inside of this new theme called Becoming the Next Version of You. In the last episode, we talked about the identity gap, the distance between who you currently are and who your next level requires you to be. We established that you cannot do your way to a level that requires you to become someone different. And I gave you an assignment. Write the description of your next level self in third person, then read it back in first person, and notice where it feels like a stretch. Today, we go into those stretches. Because every place that felt like a stretch is it's pointing at a belief, a story you hold about yourself that your next level is bumping up against. And until you surface those beliefs, until you can see them clearly and call them by name, they will keep running the show from underneath, quietly and efficiently, in ways you won't always be able to trace. So this deep work, this episode is going to require you to be honest with yourself in a way that might be, stay with me, might be a little uncomfortable. And I want to tell you up front, that discomfort is not the problem. That discomfort is the feeling of seeing something real. So let's get into it. Before we talk about dismantling these limiting beliefs, I want to talk about how they got there. Because I think understanding the origin of a belief is one of the most powerful things you can do. Not so you can blame anyone, but so you can stop treating your beliefs like they're facts about reality and start seeing them for what they are, conclusions you drew. So here's how it works. Something happens, an experience, an event, something someone says to you or does to you or fails to do for you. And your brain, which is a meaning making machine, takes that experience and draws a conclusion from it. Not a neutral conclusion, a conclusion that is shaped by your age, your context, your existing understanding of the world and what you needed that conclusion to mean in order to survive that moment. That conclusion hardens into a belief. So the belief shapes you on how you see the future experiences, because your brain, wired for efficiency, will look for evidence that confirms what it already believes and filters out evidence that challenges it. That's called confirmation bias. And it is not a flaw. It's how the human brain conserves energy. But it means that once a belief is formed, it tends to self-reinforce. So the world starts to look like proof that the belief is true, even when it isn't. And so over time, through enough experiences, the filtering through enough beliefs creates your identity. The story of who you are, the operating system you run on. Now, here is why I am telling you this. When you understand that your beliefs are conclusions rather than facts, something shifts. You stop defending them as truth and start being able to examine them as interpretations. You can ask, is this belief actually true? Or is this just the conclusion I drew from a specific experience at a specific moment in my life? Is this a fact about reality? Or is it a story that made sense once and has been running on autopilot ever since? Most limiting beliefs, when you examine them this way, turn out to be the latter. They were the best conclusion a younger, less experienced version of you could draw from the information available at the time. They served a purpose. They helped you navigate something real. And they are now so far past their expiration date, they don't even apply to your current life anymore. They just haven't been told that yet. So over years of coaching high-achieving people, people who are smart, driven, genuinely talented, and genuinely stuck, I've noticed that the limiting beliefs running the show tend to cluster around 4 themes. And I want to walk you through each one, not because every listener will have all 4, but because most people will hear at least one of these and think, oh, that's one of mine. So let's go. Ceiling belief number 1. I have to earn the right to be here. This belief that your place at the table, your right to take up space, to charge what you're worth, to lead, to be seen, to have an opinion that matters, is something that has to be constantly re-earned because it was never granted. It can always be revoked. And the evidence that you've earned, it is never quite enough. So you keep producing, keep proving, keep performing, never quite arriving at the place you were feeling settled in your own legitimacy. If the achievement addiction we talked about in episode 56 resonates with you, this is often the belief underneath it. The treadmill isn't about the achievement. It's about feeling like you're right to exist at the level. It's always provisional. So that's Ceiling limiting number 1. Ceiling belief number 2. Wanting more means I'm ungrateful for what I have. Now, this one is sneaky because it disguises itself as virtue. It sounds like humility. It sounds like contentment. But underneath, it is a belief that desires itself is dangerous. That wanting a bigger life, more impact, more income, more freedom is somehow a betrayal of the good things you already have. And so ambition gets suppressed, dreams get quietly minimized, and the person stays stuck not from the lack of capability, but from a deep unconscious belief that reaching for more makes them a bad person. Ceiling belief number 3. People like me don't do things like that. So this is the identity box. It's the belief, often inherited from family, culture, or community, that certain levels of success, certain kinds of visibility, certain types of work or wealth or impact are simply not in the territory of someone from your background. Your people don't do that. It's not how things work for someone like you. And every time you approach the edge of that box, the belief pulls you back inside, not through logic, but through the felt sense of being out of place, of not belonging there. And ceiling belief number 4. If I change too much, I lose the people I love. We touched on this in episode 57 when we talked about the fear of disappointing people. But as a belief, it runs deeper than fear. It's a survival conclusion that your belonging, your relationships, your love and connection are contingent on staying recognizable to the people who know you. That if you grow too much, become too different, move too far outside the version of you they built their understanding around, you will lose them. And for most people, the prospect of losing connection is more terrifying than the prospect of staying small. So, they choose staying small every time. I want you to sit with those 4. Which one activated something in your chest? Which one made you want to look away? Because that's the one. That's where your work is. Okay. So you've heard the 4 common ones, but your specific beliefs, the exact stories running your particular ceiling, might be more nuisance than a category. And I want to give you some tools for surfacing them because they don't always announce themselves clearly. So limiting beliefs tend to hide in 3 different places. The first place is in your automatic thoughts. The thoughts that show up without you choosing them, particularly in high-stake moments. The moment before you send the email that matters, the moment before you raise your price, the moment before you post the thing that feels vulnerable, the moment someone offers you an opportunity that's bigger than you used to. What shows up in that moment? Not the thought you choose, the thought that arrives before you can choose. That automatic thought is almost always the voice of a belief. Write it down exactly as it comes. Don't edit for how you wish you thought. That raw automatic thought is the data. The second place beliefs hide is in your patterns. The things that keep happening in your life, not once but repeatedly. The client relationship that always ends in the same way, the amount of money you make that seems to have an invisible ceiling, the type of opportunity you consistently talk yourself out of, the moment in every growth cycle where you seem to reliably pull back. Patterns are not bad luck. Patterns are beliefs in action. When something keeps happening in your external world, there is almost always a belief in your internal world that is creating the conditions for it. Find the pattern, and you'll find the belief. The third place is in your strongest emotional reactions. The things that make you disproportionately angry or defensive or triggered. When someone questions your competence or your worth or your right to be where you are, and the reaction is bigger than the situation warrants, that big reaction is usually a belief being poked. Something underneath got touched, and that touch point is where the belief lives. So this week, in addition to everything else, I want you to become a gentle investigator of your own inner landscape. Notice the automatic thoughts, the patterns, and the strong reactions. Don't judge them. Just notice them and write them down. Because you cannot dismantle what you cannot see. And naming is the first step toward dismantling. I want to say something that I mean very carefully, because I think it's one of the most important things I'll say in this entire theme. The belief that's been capping you, the one you just identified, the one that's been running quietly in the background of your life for maybe years, maybe decades, that belief was never the truth. It was a story. A really convincing one with a lot of experimental evidence to back it up, constructed by a version of you that was doing the best that they could do with what you had at the time, but it was never an objective fact about reality. It was never a law of nature. It was never a verdict about your permanent worth or your permanent ceiling or what it is and isn't possible for someone like you. It was a conclusion, and conclusions can be revised. I want to talk about this personality. I want to talk about this personally for a minute. One of my ceiling beliefs, one I carried for a long time without even knowing it was there, was a version of the first one I named earlier. The belief that I had to keep earning my right to take up space, that my authority as a coach, as a voice, as someone worth listening to, was always provisional. Always one bad session or one piece of criticism away from being revoked. And when I trace that belief back, when I'm honest about where it came from, it makes complete sense that I developed it. There were real experiences, real messages, real moments in my history that pointed toward that conclusion. A younger version of me heard things and experienced things that made the belief feel like the moment or the most rational response to the evidence. But here's what I had to reckon with eventually. I was no longer that younger version of me. The experience that built the belief were real, but they were not the totality of my experience, and the conclusion I drew from them, well, understandably, was not the only conclusion available. It was not the truth. It was one interpretation, and I had the power to choose a different one. That reckoning doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by just deciding to think positive or repeating affirmations you don't believe. It happens by doing exactly what we're doing in this theme. Seeing the belief clearly, understanding where it came from, grieving what it cost you, and then slowly and deliberately building a new story with new evidence from new actions taken as the new version of yourself. It's a process, and you are right in it now. So I want to be clear about some things before I give you a practical piece, because I think there's a version of this conversation that tips it into territory I don't want to go. So replacing a limiting belief is not about pretending the old one isn't there. It's not about forcing yourself to think positively about something you genuinely don't believe. That kind of performative optimism doesn't work, because your nervous system knows the difference between a belief you hold and a belief you're performing. And it will reject the performance every time. usually with a healthy dose of internal cynicism that makes the whole thing feel worse. So what actually works is building new evidence, real evidence. Evidence that your nervous system can argue with it because it was lived, not imagined. So here's the process. You've identified a limiting belief. Let's say it's the first one. I have to earn the right to be here. The new belief you want to build might be something like, I belong here. My presence and my contribution have inherited value. Now, you don't just decide to believe that, you build toward it. You take one action this week that the person who believed they belonged would take. Maybe you raise your rate with one client. Maybe you send the pitch without over apologizing in the opening paragraph. Maybe you walk into the room and sit at the table instead of hovering at the edge waiting to be invited. Maybe you let that compliment land instead of deflecting it. Small, real, lived. And you notice how it felt. You write it down. That moment, that one action taken from the new belief instead of the old one, becomes the first piece of evidence for the new story. Then you do it again and again. And the evidence accumulates. Slowly, the new belief starts to have as much experimental weight as the old one. And over time, not overnight, but over time, it starts to feel more truth than the old story. Not because you forced yourself to believe it, because you lived it your way into it. Evidence over affirmation, action over declaration. That's how new beliefs get built. So here's what I want you to hold from today's episode. The belief that built the old version of you were not failures. They were not signs that something is wrong with you. They were intelligent responses to real experiences constructed by a version of you that was doing the best they could. I want you to honor that version. And then make a decision about which parts of that story they wrote you're still willing to live by. Your activation this week has 3 steps. First, identify your ceiling belief. Use the 4 I named. Use the 3 hiding places I gave you. Use the automatic thoughts and the patterns and the reactions. Find the one that's most active in your life right now. Name it exactly. Write it down in plain language, not therapy language. Just what it actually says to you when it shows up. Second, trace it back. Not to assign blame, but to understand it. Where did this conclusion come from? What experience, what message, what version of your life is responding to it? When you can see the origin, you can see that it was a response, not a verdict. Third, identify one action you can take this week from the new belief instead of the old one. Just one. Something small enough to actually do. Real enough to generate genuine evidence. And then do it. And write down how it felt. That's the work. It's not dramatic, but it is transformative. All right. Our next episode, we're going to go into something that I think a lot of people experience, but no one names clearly. We call that the rubber band effect. The phenomena of expanding toward your next level, then snapping back to who you were and why it happens, and how to hold the new without collapsing back into the old. So it's going to be the title of our next episode. If you're new to this podcast, please make sure you're following. If you like today's episode, please leave a rating and a comment, or share this out to someone who needs to hear this message, because when you share this out, you are helping someone understand limiting beliefs and how to overcome them, because we all carry them, friend. We all carry them, and they're more than just affirmations. I'm going to tell you that they're more than just affirmations, but they are your next move. Okay, they are the next move. So please make sure you share this out. And I want to say thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for listening today. I'm Troy. This is On to Purpose Over Paycheck podcast. And as I always say, I'll see you on the next episode.